This is Book 6 of De Bello Gallico, and we're going to start in Chapter 13. I would strongly suggest that you have your book out. If this goes too fast, make sure you pause it, look up the words, and make sure you know what everything means. Read all the notes, and make sure you are able to put everything together. So this is a section in which Caesar is discussing the people of Gaul, and especially the Druids. And this is one of the ways that we know a lot about the Druids, because the Druids didn't keep a lot of records, and anything that they did keep wasn't transmitted through history very well. It wasn't copied a lot, so we've lost a lot of information about them. So a lot of what we know is actually from Caesar's point of view, and you have to take everything with a grain of salt, because sometimes Caesar is really good about reporting things in a very unbiased way, but of course, to Caesar, these people are barbarians and not, real people. So sometimes they aren't put in the best light. Okay, in omni Gallia, in all Gaul, eorum hominem, qui aliquo sunt numero et honore genera sunt duo. You start with your genera sunt duo and then take your genitives, eorum hominem. There are two classes of those men, and then we have a relative clause, who are, and then we have some ablatives of description, aliquo numero et honore. And it's an ablative of description, so it's going to sound genitive-y in English, but it's really an ablative, who are of some number and status. And the book gives you a note on, of some number. One of the things that you can say for this is of some class. So there's two types of men who are of some number and status. He's actually going to mention three people and then completely dismiss some of them. So this is what he's going to do here. Nam plebes Paene servorum habetur loco, quae nihil audet per se, nullo adhibetur concilio. For the plebes, and in Latin this would be like the plebeians, the lower class. Our verb is habetur, it's passive. The lower class is held. Paene loco servorum, nearly in the place of slaves. Loco is an ablative of respect, right? How are they held? In the place of slaves. Who dare nothing for themselves, right? They don't take any action on their own. Audet, right, for audacity. They dare nothing. And then nullo and concilio are dative, and adhibetur is our verb, right? And it's passive. The lower class, right, is included at no assembly, or sort of invited to no assembly. Plurique cum aut aere alieno aut magnitudine tributorum aut injuria potentiorum premuntor, sese in servitutem dicant nobilibus. Plurique, right, many. When, and now we have out, which is right, either or. Aere alieno means debt. It's really like bronze that is belonging to someone else. That alieno is like someone else. So bronze that belongs to someone else is money that you owe. It's debt. When either by debt or by magnitudine tributorum, by the size of the tribute, and tribute is tax, and we've seen that in Caesar in other places where he's demanding tribute from people, or by the injuria potentiorum, by the violence of the powerful. And potentiorum is really comparative, right? The rather powerful. Those who are able to do something. And here we get our verb premuntur. When they are pressed, and you might even can say oppressed. When they are oppressed by debt, or by the size of the tribute, right, by the size of taxes, or by violence of the powerful, many proclaim themselves in slavery to the nobility. So decant is our verb. And this is really dico dicare, not dico dicere. It's related to dico dicere, obviously, but this means to give over or surrender. So it looks like it might be subjunctive with that A, but it's really indicative. So what's happening is they're so far in debt that they're basically selling themselves into slavery to make some money to pay their debts, but then they're enslaved. And then there's a typo here. There should be a quibus in hos eadem omnia sunt iura quae dominis in servos. So there are all of the same rights for them over them. So the quibus refers back to the nobilities. They have all the same rights against them. And then the hos, in hos, against them, refers to the lower class. So the nobility have all the same rights against the lower class. Quibus is the dative of possession, which is always with a verb of to be, so we have our sunt here. Literally it says there are all the same rights for them against them, which is very confusing to say. So you have to say like for the nobility against the, or over is but over the lower class. So they have all the same rights, quae dominis in servos, which masters have over slaves. And again, dominis here is dative. It's reflecting the grammar in the first sentence. It's a dative of possession, which they have all the same rights, which are for masters against slaves, or over slaves. Sed de his duobus generis altrum est druidum altrum equitum. So basically he's saying there's two types of people. There's also this third type of people, but we're not going to talk about them, right? There's only two types of people, not this third one. So he's completely dismissing the lower class, who are like slaves, because they are like slaves. But about these two types, right, de his duobus generis, one is the druids and the other is the knights. Druidum and equitum are both the genitive, and it's just understood like class. Of these two classes, one class is of druids, the other of knights. So class of knights. Illi rebus divinis intersunt, sacrificia publica ac privata procurant religiones interpretantur. So he's going to start with illi. And when you have two things that you mention, illi is the first, and then a hoc is the second. In English we have the former and the latter. So here illi refers to the one that's furthest away in the list. So we said one is the druids, the other is the knights. The former, or the first, are involved in religious things, religious matters. Rebus divinis. Intersunt takes a dative because most compounds of est take a dative. Right? They are involved in religious matters. They take care of private and public sacrifices. They interpret religious matters. Ad hos magnus adolescentium numerus disciplinae causa concurret magnoque hi sunt apud eos honore. Ad hos, to these guys, which are the Druids, magnus adolescentium numerus, a great number, and anytime you have a great number, you expect a genitive, and it's going to be a partitive genitive, a great number of someone. And adolescentium is genitive plural of youths, a great number of youths. And then our verb is concurret, right? They flock, they run together, they hurry. So to these guys, a great number of youths flock. Disciplina causa. Causa takes a genitive, so disciplina is the genitive of causa, for the sake of something. And disciplina is learning or instruction. So I picked instruction there. So to these guys, a large number of youth flock for the sake of instruction. And, for your que, magno hi sunt apud eos honore. Magno and honore are both ablative and go together. Great honor. He is our subject. These people, right, it's the Druids, are, and then magno honore is another genitive of description, ablative of description. They are in great honor among them, apud eos. So they're held in great honor is the idea, the Druids. Nam fere de omnibus controversiis publicis privatisque constituunt. For, fere is a good word. Caesar uses fere often. It means nearly, right? Nearly about every dispute, public and private, they decide. So they judge nearly, or about nearly every public and private dispute. Et si quod est admissum facinus, si caedes facta, si de hereditate de finibus controversa est, idem decernunt. And if, and here your quod is really aliquod, if some facinus admissum est is the way that this would normally be in Latin. If some crime had been committed, or was committed, if a murder was done, si cades facta, and there's an unpolite est, if a murder happened, if, and now we have de hereditate de finibus controversia est, if there is a dispute about inheritance or about borders, idem decernunt, the same men decide. So he's giving all of the different things that the Druids have jurisdiction over, right? Religious matters, public and private sacrifices, they're held in great esteem, lots of men come to study with them. Public and private disputes, crimes, murders, inheritance, borders, right? They're like justices of the peace. Praemia poenesque constituunt. They set up rewards and punishments. Si qui aut privatus aut populus eorum decreto non stetit sacrificiis interdicunt. And your qui here is really an aliqui. Right, after sine, all the alis run away. If anyone, either private or in the population, right, of people, if any of them, that's the eorum, if any private person or people of them, decreto non stetit, do not abide by the decision. And decreto they have is a ablative of attendant circumstance, which I think is a very silly ablative. they prohibit them from the sacrifices. And so sacrifikis here is an ablative of separation. Right? They prohibit them from the sacrifice. It says, Haik poina apud eos est gravissima. This punishment among them is very serious. Right. Quibus ita est interdictum. For those, like for whom it is thus prohibited, so for the people who have for some reason been prohibited from taking a place in the sacrifices, He numero impiorum et sceleratorum habentur. These guys, these are held in the number, and again, with things like number, we're expecting a genitive of a partitive genitive of the whole. They're held in the number of the wicked and ungodly, or the impious and wicked. He omnes discadunt. All depart from these guys. All forsake these. Shun them. Auditum sermonumque defugunt. They flee their arrival and their speech, right? Their conversation. Ne quid ex contagione incommodi accipiant. The quid here is also an ali quid because it's not just C, it's after C, nisi, ne. So here we have a ne, and that makes our ali run away. And this is a negative purpose. And in English, we can also often start negative purpose with lest, which I think is great. We don't do it a lot in real English, but you can. Right? So they flee their approach and their conversation lest they acquire anything of inconvenience, which is incommodi, ex contagione, from the contact. So everyone leaves them alone because they're afraid that it'll, rub off on them. Neque his petentibus ius reditur. And justice is not, right? Neque is and not. So and justice is not returned, right? Given back. His petentibus, to these guys seeking it. Petentibus is a present active participle. Nor, because we have two neques, which neither nor onus ulus communicator, nor is any honor imparted, shared. His autem omnibus druidibus prae est unus. His omnibus druidibus is dative, and prae est takes a dative. It's a compound of est, and normally they take a dative. Prae sum prae esse means to be in charge. So one guy, however, that's your autem, is in charge, and in English we say of these, but in Latin you say to, and it takes a dative. One man is in charge of all these druids. His omnibus druidibus. Qui summum inter eos habet auctoritatem. Who has the summum auctoritatem, the highest authority, inter eos, among them. Hoc mortuo aut si qui ex reliquis excellit. Hoc mortuo is an ablative absolute. And remember, you can say when the noun had been verbed, or after, or because. And more tuo is deponent. To die is deponent. So after this man has died, and we have two outs, either one thing or another thing. Either if some ex reliquis of the remaining, if someone of the remaining excels, dignitate succedit. He succeeds, he succeeds him. And the dignitate, I'm pretty sure goes with the excellit. He excels in dignity, or by dignity, by merit, rank. That's what it is. Or, si sunt plures pares, if there are many equals, suffragio druidum, by a vote of the druids. So suffragio is a ablative, and it's where we get suffrage from, like women's suffrage, the vote. Druidum is genitive plural. By a vote of the druids, non numquam. Numquam is never, non numquam is not never. So it means sometimes. By a vote of the druids, sometimes even armies, by weapons, de principatu contendunt, they compete about the sort of chief position, the chief leadership. Hicerto ani tempore infinibus carnutem, quae regio totius Galliae media habetur, considunt in loco consecretu. These men, at a certain time of the year, so certo, tempore go together, and then ani is genitive, at a certain time of the year, in the borders of the Carnutes, who we've talked about earlier in Caesar, the Carnutes, qui regio totius, which is a region considered the middle of all Gaul. Totius Galliae is genitive. Considunt, which means like they, it really means like they sit down together. They gather. So these guys, at a certain time of year, in the borders of the Carnutes, which region is considered, which is held to be the middle of all Gaul, they gather in loco consecreto, in a sacred place. Huc omnes undique, qui controvertios habent, conveniunt. Huc means to here. Omnes, everyone. Undique, from everywhere. Qui controvertios habent, who have disputes. Conveniunt, they gather. It's another gather word. They come together. Eorum decretis judiciisque parent, and they obey, and obey takes a dative. We've got lots of things that take a dative. They are obedient to the decrees and judgments, eorum, of these guys, of them. So to hear, everyone, from everywhere, who have disputes, gather, and they obey the decrees and judgments of them. And the eorum refers back to the druids, right? So everyone comes and obeys the judgments of the druids. So it's like, if you have a problem, you know where to find the druids. They, at a certain time of year, they're going to be in the place where the Carnutes are. Disciplina in Britannia reperta, et atque inde in Galliam translata esse existimatur. Our subject's disciplina and our verb is existimatur. This teaching, right, the teaching of the Druids, is believed, and then we have to have, this is an indirect statement. So it is believed to have been reperta, found in Britain, and translata, brought inde, from there, into Gaul. And so reperta and translata both are passive infinitives. Translata is the only one with the essay. Reperta, you have to assume that there's an essay to make it a passive infinitive. So the teaching is said to have been found in Britain and to have been brought into Gaul. So it's not even native to this land. He's saying that, well, people say that it comes from Britain. And now, those who diligentius eam rem cognoscere volunt, who want to understand eam rem, this thing, diligentius, more carefully. Diligentius is a comparative adverb. So now those who want to understand it more carefully. Plurumque illo discendi causa proficuscor. Many, like for the most part, they set out proficiscuntur, which is deponent. They set out illo, to that place, and then we have another causa plus the genitive, which we saw earlier with disciplinae causa, discendi causa, for the sake of learning. Here, it's not a noun, right, for the sake of study, right? This is for the sake of learning. So this is a gerund of purpose, which is causa plus the genitive. And that is 613. We blazed right through it. Make sure you read all the notes and go back over your Latin and know not just what the translation is, but how it refers back to the Latin, know all the cases, know what all the words mean, and that is 613.